how long, well, let me put it this way. Do you know when it was that Sabrina and Rob Limon got married?
In 2000.
Okay. How old was Sabrina, if you recall?
Oh, goodness. I don't know. I'd have to do the math. She was born in 79.
Okay. So
21.
2021. Okay. You have trouble remembering dates?
Yes.
Okay. And I know you're nervous.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Relax. It's okay.
Okay.
This is not a natural thing for anybody to be doing, okay?
Yes.
All right. From the time they got married, well, let me ask you this. Was your husband responsible for her husband getting on with the railroad?
Yes.
Okay. Your husband worked for the railroad at that time?
Yes, he did.
Okay. And he was the one who helped Rob get a job working for BNSF?
Yes.
Do you remember when it was that they came to California? Because they were living in Arizona originally, is that right?
Yes.
And then when they got the job with BNSF, did they move to California?
I believe it was in 2001.
That was before Robbie and Leanna were born?
Yes.
Okay. Did they seem to have a good marriage, a happy marriage?
Yes, very much so.
Okay. At some point after Leanna was born, did you notice any types of changes in their, with regards to their relationship?
No, not really. They were not coming around as much. They were with their friends more.
Okay.
But no,
Okay.
they were.
Were they partiers?
Yes.
And that was even after Leanna was born?
Yes.
And did they do a lot of activities with their friends?
Yes.
Okay. At some point, did you become aware that Rob and Limon and Sabrina had opened their relationship?
Yes.
Objection, hearsay, will discuss.
How did you become, well, how did you go about becoming aware of whether or not Sabrina and Rob's relationship had changed?
Well, we were, and Brina always wanted us around, and Rob, but their friends were there all the time, and they were always drinking, and so they would hang out in the backyard a lot too, and I'd see Kelly take off her shirt. I've seen she would take off her shirt at night when they were drinking, and then she would go on the, they had a zip line, and she would strip down naked. I've seen that a couple of times with Kelly. I've seen...
Well, Mr. Terry, as to what she saw other people do, does
Yes.
that
It's
lead
relevant.
to what she eventually saw out of Ms. Limon and her husband?
Yes.
Subject to a motion to strike all along. Next question.
So you saw these types of activities by Ms. Bernatine and some of their other friends, is that right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And did you notice there appeared to be some sort of change after you made these observations with regards to Sabrina and Rob's relationship, or some noticeable difference in Sabrina?
No.
So nothing
I did.
appeared out of the ordinary, and they were going about their lives the same as always, is that right?
Yes, Sabrina, I mean, they drank a lot, and I was concerned about her drinking so much.
Did you voice that to Rob?
I did.
And And from what you observed, did he appear concerned about the amount of drinking that Sabrina was doing?
No, and he'd say, "Oh, sister, it's going to be fine. She'll be fine. She goes to work at Costco tomorrow." And we were both driving to work on that day, I remember, and I saw him. And so when I called him and we put our coffee mugs up to, and he's like, "Oh, no, she's great."
Okay. Let me ask you this. How do you deal with things that are, say, difficult for you to accept?
Objection,
Yeah.
relevance.
Sustained.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed in Sabrina, when things are difficult for her to deal with, what her reaction is?
Objection, improper
Yeah.
opinion.
Objection is what?
Improper opinion.
Are you older or younger than she is?
Me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm 16 years older.
Objection's overruled.
Ms. Cordova, based on your observations, how did Sabrina deal with things that were difficult or tough for her to address?
Objection based.
Overruled. You can answer.
She would tend to not talk about it. So if it's kind of the way I am, and if you don't talk about it, it doesn't really exist. Or I think about my bills this month, and I'm like, oh, but I know I have to get them out. But once you see them, then that's it's just she always was. She's so happy and always positive, and always kept me positive. And yeah, but
During any of the time in 2014 leading up to Rob's death, did Sabrina ever seem to be different in any way with her relationship with Rob that you observed?
no, the only thing is we would talk on the phone daily, and she would tell me, I
Objection,
want to
hearsay.
get
Sorry?
Okay.
Hearsay.
okay.
Just whether or not you observed any differences between Sabrina and Rob's relationship during 2014 up until his death.
No.
And you talked to her on a daily basis, is that right?
Yes.
Were you aware that from sometime possibly 2013 through till Rob's death, she was involved in a extramarital affair with Jonathan Hearn?
No.
Did she even ever mention Jonathan Hearn?
No.
On August 17th, when Rob was killed, did Sabrina call you?
Yes, she did.
Did you go over to her home?
I did.
How far away did you and your husband live from Sabrina?
2-3 miles.
And when you arrived, what kind of emotional condition did you observe Sabrina to be in?
Oh, she was a mess. She was crying and screaming, and there were 2 guys from the railroad there. My son was with me, and the kids were crying in shock.
And did you spend the rest of the night with her?
I did.
Did you sleep with her that night?
I did. I held her hand and I rubbed her head. Yes.
During the next few weeks, or actually the next few months, was Sabrina, from your observations, struggling with dealing with Robert's death?
Yes. She wasn't eating. I went over there every day, and I took off work, and she was not doing well. She would collapse on the floor when the kids would be asleep, and I'd have to get her up off the floor. I'd dress her. She was a mess.
Did you know that she was, during that time, also talking with Jonathan Hearn?
No, I did not.
At some point, did you actually meet Jonathan Hearn?
I did.
And when did that occur? If you can recall.
A week or two, maybe a week. He came over with his sister.
Is that Emily?
Yes.
And were you at Sabrina's home when
Yes.
he came over?
Yes.
Was there anyone else there?
The kids were there. And then I believe my son and my daughter-in-law came over later. But at that time, it was just me, Brina, and the kids.
How long did you stay there that night?
Quite a while.
Okay. Was Jonathan still there when you left?
Yes.
Was Emily still there when you left?
Yes. My son had made the comment, too. He won't leave after we had talked about it.
Okay. Was there another time when Jonathan came over to Sabrina's when you were there?
Yes.
And how long after that first time that you met him was it?
I had gone back to work then. I'm going to say 3 weeks
And what happened on that
after.
occasion?
He was in the kitchen cooking dinner.
And you recall what happened after that?
Yes, and Emily was there also, and I had taken, the first, it was only the second time I had seen them, but I had shoes. I had found out Emily wore the same size shoe. And so I took Emily a pair of shoes, and my mom and dad were going over, Brina told me, and she was begging me to stay there.
Why?
She just
Objection,
seemed...
speculation.
Just take.
Let me ask you this. Did you stay there that night with your mom, your dad, Sabrina?
I did not. I was tired after work.
Let me ask you this. After Robert's death, who was helping, or did anyone help Sabrina with regards to the life insurance and the dealing with the railroad?
Yes, I did.
Did anyone else try to help out with that that you're aware of?
Kelly kept trying to get involved.
Kelly Bernatine?
Yes. She wanted all the phone numbers, and when I would go over to Brina's, Kelly was there in the morning, and she'd be picking up the phone. So then when I was doing the business, then they'd be, so who's Kelly? And she was just, I was always trying to, keep things. And I told Brina, this is private stuff. She doesn't need to be involved.
Now, with regards to BNSF, did you become involved with dealing with them?
Yes.
Was there some reason that you had some concern with regards to BNSF?
Yes.
Why?
My husband was hurt at the railroad, and we had to go, and they didn't cover him for his insurance, and we had to go to court with them, and they didn't take care of him.
So basically, after your husband got hurt, BNSF kind of dumped him.
Yes.
And were you concerned that they would try to do the same thing to Sabrina and the kids after Rob's death?
Absolutely, and I remember Brina and Rob were with us during this time that my husband and I were going through this, and they were there, and Robert told me,
You
you know.
can't talk about,
Okay,
can't talk about what Robert told you, I'm sorry.
Okay.
You have to stick about what you know and what
Okay.
you've seen. Okay. So, do you know whether or not the kids and Sabrina's health insurance was cut off after Rob's death?
yes, and I was really on her about it because I was so concerned about that health insurance and that the kids would be taken care of.
And were you the one who contacted the life insurance carrier to get that process going?
Yes. I went through all of her files and found it and did it for her.
Now, I got to ask, is based on your experience and your time with dealing with Sabrina, is she about money?
No, no. She's absolutely not. Now, she's the least. She has loaned us money and with no intentions on getting money back. This was a way long time ago when my husband and I went through this. She has helped my son with his student loan. She helped friends. And no, and she doesn't spend money. No, Rob, on the other hand, used to like to buy clothes and shoes. He used to like to buy this kid's stuff. But Brina she was good with her things, simple things. And that's,
do you know whether or not strike that. Were you the one who told Sabrina to contact BNSF regarding a settlement on for Rob's death?
yes, I did.
And were you there when did you observe her do it?
Yes. You know, they contacted her the first time. And he was out there the very next day that Robert passed away. And we had to sit at the table, and I was there, and my daughter-in-law was there, because and Brina was there, but Brina just couldn't comprehend anything.
Couldn't process it?
Couldn't process it. So my daughter-in-law, she was, young, and she kind of helped us through it too.
Was it that Sabrina wanted to get a big chunk of money from the railroad?
Objection, speculation.
If you know. Did Sabrina ever indicate to you, or are you aware whether or not there was any dollar amount that was discussed with regards to any type of settlement?
Objection, hearsay.
No,
Go ahead.
no, can I? No. And
You can cross on that, Mr.
I would tell her, like, Brina, you have to take care of these kids and yourself. It was unsafe where Robert was.
And let me ask you this. Some of the things that she and Robert owned, the car, the boat, those types of things, you know what happened to those?
Yes, their boat, and it was called the Limon Tree, and Brina gave it to Rob's sister and brother-in-law.
And Rob's car, do you know what she did with that?
She wanted to give it to my sister-in-law, my husband's sister, because their car wasn't really working, and they were going back and forth, and it was for Pam and James, but they said no, thank you very much. They just, and so my dad ended up selling it.
at some point after Rob's death, did you learn that Sabrina was having an affair with Jonathan Hearn?
No, not until the detective called me.
Till then, you had no idea?
Absolutely no idea.
Did Sabrina ever tell you that she and Rob, specifically tell you that she and Rob were involved in an open marriage?
Objection, hearsay.
Did Rob at any time ever indicate to you in any way that they were involved in an open relationship?
Objection, hearsay.
Did you think yourself that they may be,
Objection, relevance.
based upon
Let
what
me hear the
you,
question. One more time, Mr. Terry.
based upon the observations that you made, did you believe that they may be involved in an open relationship?
What's the objection?
Relevance as to what she believed.
So as to the perceptions of other people and the communications that they would have with regards to those things.
Sustained.
Julie, in your mind, would Sabrina ever do anything to place her children, potentially place her children in danger?
Objection, relevance, and proper opinion.
Absolutely not.
Relevance and what? Mr. Smith, could you use that microphone?
I'm sorry.
for me, please?
Improper opinion.
Oh, you can answer.
Absolutely not.
Was she protective of her children?
Very much. She's an amazing mother. Her heart and soul is everything in those kids. I remember when she wanted to be pregnant, and that's all she wanted was children. She's worked with children, loves it, took care of my children, my two boys. She had nothing but love, love, love.
Would she ever, in your opinion, be involved in anything that would harm Rob?
No.
Objection, improper
She
opinion.
loved
Hold
him.
on a second. Listen. Mr. Terry, your question itself is objectionable in her opinion. It's the same. Answer be strict.
Based upon your observations, was there anything to indicate to you that their relationship had gotten to a point where Sabrina would take steps to harm Rob?
Same
No.
objection, Your Honor. Improper opinion.
No.
The question was, did she see anything that would make her think that?
Yes.
Objection's overruled. The answer is stand.
No.
Answer stands again.
She took care of him.
Based on your observations, were Rob and Sabrina basically, with regards to the family, a team?
Yes,
And they worked together for the family?
absolutely. And, you know, my husband and I raised our two boys, and Randy worked a lot, and, you know, so I was with the boys a lot. But
Sustained.
Yeah, that's fine. You answered the question, ma'am.
I can?
No, you answered the question.
Oh.
That's fine. Okay. I know you want to expound on it, but
Okay.
there's a limit.
Okay.
I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Mr. Smith, Rob? Thank you, Mr. Terry.
Good morning, Ms. Cordova.
Good morning.
Prior to her arrest this year, where was Sabrina living?
In Camarillo.
Where is Camarillo?
It's in by Thousand Oaks,
Do you know what county that's in?
Ventura.
Ventura. How close is that to the beach?
It's about 40 minutes.
Describe the house that Sabrina Limon lived in Camarillo, just outside.
It's a complex where it's like a village with children, and there's a soccer field and an elementary school. And Robbie played soccer, and they were in elementary, and the children were so many children that they got to play with.
I was asking about the house. I apologize. What did the house look like that she lived in Camarillo?
Like, it was decorated like the one she had in Silver Lakes.
What did the house look like on the outside in Camarillo? Just style of house.
It's a complex, like an apartment building.
Okay. How many stories did her home have?
3.
3 stories. Okay. Would it be fair to characterize it as a townhome?
I guess if that's
Well, okay. Have you seen too many 3-story apartments in your life?
3, a couple of times.
Okay.
A few times. My other sister lived in a 3-story.
Okay. It's connected to another home, and it's a row of homes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. It's a 3-story house connected to other houses.
I wouldn't call it a house.
How many square feet
My
was her
hus-
home in Camarillo?
I don't know.
Okay. The home in Camarillo, how close was it to a pool?
Right, their pool's right outside.
Okay. Do you know the value of the home?
I have no idea.
Okay. Is it dumpy?
No.
Is it nice?
Yes.
Okay. So after Robert Limon died, Miss Limon moved from a desert community kind of in the middle of nowhere to Camarillo, which is in Ventura County, not far from the beach, into a 3-story townhome. Is that fair?
No.
Okay. She didn't move from Hellendale and she didn't move to Camarillo?
Yes, that's fair, but can I talk about
No.
our community in Silver Lakes?
No, I'm asking you if she moved from a desert community to Camarillo.
Yes, she did, to be with family.
The last time we met in person, your sister was being arrested, correct?
I'm sorry, I
The
didn't.
last time we met in person, your sister was being arrested.
Yes.
And that was at the 3-story apartment in Camarillo.
Yes.
After we had Miss Limon in the front of the patrol vehicle, do you recall what you did?
I told her I was calling Richard.
Okay. Do you recall yelling at her as she was sitting in the car, screaming at her not to say anything to them?
Yes, Richard told me to tell her that.
I thought you were going to call Richard.
I had him on the phone. And then I said, Richard said not to say anything as I did that.
Okay. So do you recall saying, don't say anything to them?
Yes.
Okay. I want to ask you about the life insurance. Did you get the phone numbers from Sabrina, or did you research them yourself?
I researched them
Okay.
in the file cabinet.
So Sabrina she never assisted you in writing phone numbers down, getting phone numbers, etc.
I did that. In fact, I would go to my parents' house. I would take all the files and things, and I'd go to my parents' house and fill it all out and make phone calls from there, because so many of the friends and stuff were getting into her business. So I went to my parents.
Now, did you party a lot with Robert and Sabrina?
No, we didn't. We were there quite a bit, but we didn't really, we're older and we didn't really party too much.
You talked about Sabrina and drinking.
Yes.
How much did she drink?
I don't know, but she would get drunk.
Well, you spoke about one particular occasion when you were very concerned about her and her amount of drinking.
Yes.
Okay. And you were at her house quite a bit.
Yes.
Were you concerned about her drinking?
Yes.
Okay. So this drinking, would you consider it to excess?
Sometimes.
So when Miss Limon was at home, you've seen occasions where she drunk to excess.
Yes.
Her family home.
Yes.
You also said the next morning after Robert had been, I think at the time you believed he was hurt.
Yes.
Okay, the next morning. Were you present when she was making any calls, any text messages at all?
No, we knew he had passed away that night.
Oh, I apologize. You said that you stayed that night then?
Yes, I did.
Okay. You were there in the morning as well?
Yes.
Okay. Were you present when she was text messaging people on the phone?
Sometimes.
Okay. Were you aware of what phone she was using?
No.
Did you see her go and get kind of an extra phone from somewhere in her bedroom in a drawer?
No, I did not. There were so many people there.
I was asking about phones.
Oh,
So you never saw her go get a phone out of the bedroom?
no.
Now, she had the phone with her at all times?
I don't know. She didn't.
Did you ever see her with the phone then, I guess would be the question.
In the evening, I did.
In the morning of the 18th is the time frame I'm asking about. Did you see her with a phone since you stayed there all night and into the next morning?
Yes.
Okay. What did that phone look like?
I have no idea.
Okay. Well, you
I
saw
can't-
your sister every day. Is that the phone you usually saw her with?
To answer the question honestly, I don't know. I paid no attention to that.
Now, your husband was hurt while working for BNSF.
Yes.
Okay. Initially, from what I got from your testimony, he got screwed over. Is that fair? Initially.
They did not take care of him.
Okay. When what happened to Rob, you were pretty aware of what the payments were that BNSF might be liable for. Is that fair?
No.
Did you specifically tell Sabrina to ask for a fair settlement, not a high settlement?
Yes.
Okay. So you wanted her not to get as much money as possible from the railroad, which she would be due.
Well, yes, I said to take care of her and her children. Rob's career is what I said.
Okay.
Throughout Rob's career, what would be right for the children?
All right. You were not aware of how much money she could have ultimately received, or were you?
No.
Okay.
Millions? Is that what Rob's life? I don't know.
Okay. So why would you're looking at your nephew and niece, wouldn't
Yes.
you want them to get as much money as possible from the railroad?
Absolutely, I would.
So did you tell her to only ask for a fair settlement and not ask for too high of an amount?
No.
So you told her, get as much money as you can.
That's not what I said.
Well, what did you say?
I said, we have to figure out what Rob's career would be. So these children are taken care of. Robert was a worker, as my husband, and they need to take care of the kids.
Right. So
Their
Robert's,
daddy was working for them.
so Robert's career, if it lasted another 20 years, that's about $2 million. So that would have been the right amount to ask for. Is that?
If that's what it is, then
Were you ever worried that BNSF, like investigators, were around looking at Sabrina's house?
no.
What about law enforcement? I mean, were you ever kind of paranoid that law enforcement might be out there in Silver Lakes looking at her house?
No. The only ones I worried about, all the stalkers out there in Silver Lakes. They would sit outside her home and stalk her and harass her. So those are the ones I worried about.
Okay. My question was more about, were you worried about law enforcement?
No.
Okay. Were you ever worried that BNSF would look into it and then find out what happened and not give Sabrina any money?
No.
Now, the house in Hellendale, what happened to the house?
Sabrina sold it.
Okay. Did she give that money away?
No, she put it in accounts for the children.
Okay. Are you aware of whether or not she receives a monthly annuity from the Railroading Association?
Yes, she does.
Okay. How much life insurance money did she receive?
The life insurance, $300,000.
Okay. Did she give that to you?
To me?
Right, since you're doing all the work and she gives money away?
No, but she helped me a lot. She helped us, and
So if you were to put yourself in time prior to the death of Robert Limon, and you were to know that, based on what you knew, that BNSF would, if something happened, have to pay out a fair amount for the remainder of somebody's career.
yes.
Okay.
And I wasn't the only one. I had railroad union men
Your
come
Honor, I
and
would
tell me.
Yes, Mr.
I would request be moved to strike. You would be aware that, based on your knowledge and what you've spoken to Ms. Sabrina about, that Robert's career, it could be up to $2 million, what he could receive in the case of an accident or an injury at the railroad.
I'm sorry. Say that.
You said that something happened to your husband. Sabrina and Rob were aware that something happened to your husband, and you went through the process with BNSF.
Did I discuss that with them?
Yes.
No.
So they weren't aware that it happened?
They were aware that my husband got hurt,
Okay.
but I never discussed anything about Robert.
Okay. Did she ever ask you how long it took for life insurance policies to be paid?
Who, Brina?
Sabrina, yes.
No.
Did you also assist Ms. Limon in getting the additional $30,000 in life insurance from the railroad?
Yes, I was assisted by union men from the railroad to do that.
And that would be Mr. Flatten, Daniel Flatten Jr., did he assist?
No. It was Lolly Enriquez and Leo Eastless, and they were union.
Okay.
They said we need to do it right away.
And when you say they're union, I mean, what do you mean? They work for the railroad, or that's their
They work
specialty?
for the railroad, but they are the union men.
Okay. What did you do to assist Sabrina in getting the $2 million that you believe she deserved from BNSF?
Objection.
I-
Assumes facts, not evidence. You rephrase it, Mr. Smith.
You said earlier that a fair amount for Robert's career would be around $2 million.
I said that?
I believe so. You said Robert's career, and I said if he was to make $2 million over 20 years, that would be about $2 million.
Okay, so you did the calculation, I guess, and
Oh.
so what was the question?
It came from earlier in the trial, so that's why I was using it. Did you do anything to assist Ms. Limon in getting that $2 million from BNSF?
I talked to Dan, the claim agent.
Okay. And after you talked to Dan, what did you do?
Then I told Brina.
Okay. And what did you do after that?
I don't know.
Okay.
What do you mean?
Well, who's taking care of the children now?
Who's taking care of them?
Yes.
Right when that was happening?
No, at this moment in time.
I am.
Okay. Do you know whether or not a settlement's ever been paid by BNSF?
No, it has not.
Okay. What steps have you taken to get that money?
I knew that the 3-year stipulation was coming up on Robert's death. So I called and talked to Dan, and he always said, if you need anything, and I said, it's time to take care of these children. And he didn't call me back. I then called a Barstow claim agent and said this needs to be right for these children. They lost their daddy on the job, and it wasn't safe. And they told me no, they would not take care of the children.
Okay. Who killed Robert Limon, as in physically killed him?
Jonathan Hearn?
Okay. When did you make the call to BNSF? This second or this later call you're speaking about. Is it this year? Because that would have been the 3 years.
Yes.
Okay. So that would be after your sister was arrested.
Yes.
Okay. Let's go prior to when your sister was arrested. What steps did you take to assist your sister in getting that money from BNSF?
We talked about it, and she had called Dan and asked for the kids' insurance, and he said that they couldn't do it at that time. Brina and I then talked about it several times, and we were going to get that done. We were taking care of my dying cousin for a whole year, so we were distracted on things, and then we were going to get it done.
Okay. So you talked to Mr. Flatten in around 2014, along with Sabrina.
That's his. I just know him by Dan.
Okay, I'm sorry. You spoke with Dan.
Yes.
In 2014.
Yes.
And that's when the initial commentary about the settlement came up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you spoke again with Dan in this year following Ms. Limon's arrest.
Yes.
Okay. Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, thank
Good morning, Ms. Cordova.
Hi.
Ms. Cordova, Mr. Smith talked to you a little bit about the house in Camarillo.
Yes.
Are you living in the house with the kids now?
Yes, I'm staying there because Robbie and Leanna do not want to leave. They have children to play with, and so we're trying to juggle both houses. My job is up in Silver Lakes, in Barstow, so I'm trying to just balance whatever, juggle whatever we can do.
Okay. Now, with regards to the house in Silver Lakes that Sabrina and Rob owned,
Yes,
was it a nice home?
yes,
Did Sabrina decorate the inside of the house?
yes,
And did she decorate it similarly the way she decorated the house in Camarillo?
yes.
Did they have a pool at the house in Silver Lakes?
No, but they had a community pool
No.
and golf course and 2 big lakes.
So it's a nice kind of.
Yes.
Is it a gated community or?
No, but it's a home association.
Okay, golf course type of organized community?
Yes,
Okay. And at some point, did Sabrina decide to sell the house in Silver Lakes, if you're aware?
yes,
Was that after she was arrested and then released by the police in 2014?
yes.
Do you know why she sold the house in Silver Lake?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
Let me ask you this. Did you assist her in the process of selling the house in Silver Lake?
Yes. I did. We talked about it. But my son's mother-in-law helped her because she's a realtor.
Okay. And do you know how much money she actually netted off the sale of the house?
I don't.
Okay. At the time that she, after she was arrested and released, were the kids, Robbie and Leanna, going to school, if you know?
Yes. Say that again?
Sure. After she was released, the first time she was arrested in 2014, were Robbie and Leanna still going to school in Silver Lakes?
Yes.
At some point, if you know, were they taken out of school and homeschooled?
Yes. They were living with my husband and I.
Was there a reason that they were being homeschooled, if you know?
Yes. They were being harassed, mainly Sabrina. There were kids at
Objection,
school
hearsay,
saying mean
non-sustained.
things.
Sustained.
Were you ever present when things were being said to Robbie and Leanna that were hurtful?
I was not present at the time, but I was with Sabrina.
You were with Sabrina when people were harassing her?
Not harassing, but they would sit outside her home and like stalk her and sit outside. She would be driving in Silver Lakes with Leanna in the car, and they tried to ram her.
Was Sabrina, from what you observed, having difficulty because, let me ask you, since Silver Lake's kind of a really small, homogenized community,
Yes.
is it one of those things where kind of everybody knows everybody's business?
Yes.
And by then, this case was all over the news in Silver Lakes?
Yes.
And was there, from things you observed, was there a lot of negative feelings from people that you observed towards Sabrina?
Yes. Social media was horrible too.
What type of social media are we talking about?
Like Facebook and all those things, they would put terrible things about her.
Objection, relevance, move to strike.
Be stricken. Sustained.
Well, did you actually read these things?
Some of them. I can't remember exactly.
Was that, if you know, was all these things that were happening with the kids and Sabrina, was that the reason she sold the house in Silver Lakes?
Objection,
Yes.
speculation.
Sustained.
Move to strike.
Be stricken.
Is the house in Camarillo nicer than the house that they had in Silver Lakes?
No.
Is it as big as the house they had in Silver Lake?
Is it as big? This one goes up, and the one in Silver Lakes is out, just single story. And I'll tell you, at the complex, there's kids running in and out, and it's like a village there. So it's quieter in Silver Lakes also.
But the one where you're living now, or where she's living now in Camarillo, that's more kid friendly then.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And it's newer,
And you mentioned the fact that you had a family member, or that Sabrina moved to that location because she had family, or you have family that lives there.
Yes.
And what was the family that lived there?
Our cousin Billy and Susan, and they're more like our brother and sister.
And did something happen? You mentioned one of your family members' cousins got sick. Was that Susan?
Yes.
What happened to Susan?
Objection, relevance.
We
Sustained.
Your Honor, it's foundational, based upon questions that counsel asked Ms. Cardova.
Might be a good spot for the morning recess. Take 15 minutes. Remember not to form or express any opinion or discuss the case. See y'all back in 15 minutes. Sit back. After this particular witness, Ms. Cordova, you plan on putting your client on, you want to take your waiver outside the presence of the jury. Go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Ms. Limon, you understand that you have a constitutional right to remain silent. Can you speak?
Yes.
And you understand that if you take the stand in your own defense, that you'll be waiving that right to remain silent.
Yes, I do.
You understand that no one can force you to take the stand to testify in this proceeding.
Yes.
And do you waive that right? Will you? Are you still wanting to take the stand and testify in this case?
Yes.
Is this of your own free will?
Yes.
Have you discussed with me and understand that this is your decision as to whether or not you take the stand in your own defense? Yes. Do you understand that it is you're the only one who can decide whether or not you're willing to take the stand and testify on your own behalf?
Yes.
You understand that no one else can force you to testify on your own behalf?
Yes.
Is it your wish to testify on your own behalf in this case?
Yes.
All right, and Ms. Limon, you understand that Mr. Terry is going to ask you questions, that at that point, Mr. Smith also has the opportunity to ask you questions. And having that in mind, you still wish to testify. All right, Mr. Terry, I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, Daniel, for you. All right, we'll go back on the record in People v. Limon. She's present in court with her attorney and the people are represented. We have all +4 in the box. Ms. Cordova on the stand. Mr. Terry was on cross. The last objection will be overruled. Noted for the record, Mr. Smith. Thank you. Mr. Terry, please.
Ms. Cordova, you'd indicated that one of your cousin, Susan, was ill. Is that right?
Yes, she was diagnosed with cancer.
Okay. And on the day...
Mr. Terry, I'm sorry. Mr. Terry is on redirect. The court has gotten used to saying cross. I'm sorry.
It's okay, Your Honor. It's a change of pace for me, too.
I apologize.
It's all right. Ms. Cordova, on the day that Sabrina was arrested, well, let me ask you this. Had your cousin passed away shortly before the day Sabrina was arrested?
Yes, she did.
And were you and Sabrina getting ready to go to her funeral?
Yes, and Brina planned her funeral.
Now, the day that Mr. Smith and the police arrived at Sabrina's house, did they arrived at the front door? Is that right?
Yes, they did.
Did they knock on the door?
Yes.
Did you or Sabrina let them in?
Sabrina opened the door, but they didn't come in.
Okay. Did they ask her to step out?
Yes.
Okay. And did you know it was the police and Mr. Smith?
No, I looked out the window, and that's when I recognized Myers.
Okay. And were you still inside the house?
Yes.
Did they, at that point, did you observe them handcuffing Sabrina?
No. I got her shoes.
Okay. And where did you go after you got, she wasn't wearing shoes when she went outside?
No.
Did you bring her shoes out to her?
I did. They were just by the door, outside the front door.
Okay. And what did you do after you gave Sabrina the shoes?
I went inside. My parents were there, and so we went inside. Maybe I don't recall how it all took place.
Okay. When you went back inside, is that when you called me?
Yes. I think maybe they did tell me they're taking her, something like that.
Okay. And then you went back in the house, and that's when you called me.
Yes, I did.
And then you went back out. When you went back outside, where was Sabrina?
She was in the car.
And is that when you spoke to her?
Yes.
And after you spoke to her, did you go back into the house?
Yes.
Did Mr. Smith come back to talk to you at some point?
No, I believe it was another detective. He might have been there. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But I know there was another detective.
Pretty hectic day
It was.
between the funeral and this
Yeah.
happening.
Yes, and I was worried because Leanna was already out of school, so I texted a neighbor to please keep her inside.
Robbie wasn't home at that time?
No, he was not.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor. Thank you.
Smith?
Ms. Cordova, I just wanted to ask you about Silver Lakes. You said that people know everything about each other in Silver Lakes.
Not everybody, but it is a small community, and they have a Silver Lakes chat or something, and yes.
So people are pretty aware of what's going on in other people's lives, according to your testimony.
Yes.
Nothing further on.
No further questions. Cordova, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Terry?
Yes, Your Honor, at this time, the defense will call Sabrina Limon to the stand.
Lamone, would you please stand and raise your right hand and be sworn?
You do solemnly state that the testimony you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do.
Come on up, have a seat. Good morning, ma'am. Can you tell us your name and spell your first and last name for the record?
My name's Sabrina Limon, Limon.
Thank you. Your witness, Mr. Terry.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Limon.
Good morning.
Ms. Limon, I know we've kind of heard quite a bit about your relationship with Rob through the interviews that the police conducted with you. I'm going to just kind of do a brief recap of that. You and Rob got together when you were 18 years old?
Yes.
Okay. And when you first started dating was when you were 18?
Yes.
Okay. And did you and Rob move or start living together when you were 18?
Yes.
Okay. How much was Rob older than you or same age?
He was 3 years older than me.
Okay. And at the time that you and he met, what were you doing for a living?
I worked at a daycare.
Like a daycare center itself?
Yes.
Okay.
Lamont, could you get a little closer to that microphone?
Sure.
Thank you very much.
And had you, or did you graduate from high school?
No.
How long after you and Rob started living together did you get married?
Uh, 2 years.
So you're
Almost
about,
3.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Almost 3 years.
Okay. How old were you when you got married to Rob?
20.
During the first part of your marriage, were you and Rob happy together?
We're so happy together.
Was he a good man?
He was a great man.
And did you and he, well, let me ask you this. How old were you when Robbie was born?
23?
Okay. So it was about 3 years into your marriage or thereabouts?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the age difference between Robbie and Leanna?
Almost 3 years.
Okay. How old's Leanna now?
She's 11.
She said she was 10 up there and she was off by a little bit?
Yes, she's probably nervous.
When you and Rob first got married, where were you living?
We were living in Prescott, Arizona.
At some point, did you and he move to California?
We did.
And do you remember when approximately that was?
In 2000.
And where did you move?
We moved to Hellendale.
Okay. Did you live in that same house in Hellendale the entire time that you and he were married?
We did. It was our first home. Yes.
And how is it that you guys moved from Prescott to Hellendale?
Robert got a job for the railroad.
And was he working, what particular yard was he working out of most of the time?
Barstow. Barstow Yard.
Can you kind of describe, what your home in Hellendale was like? Well, let me start with this. Was it a single family home?
Yes.
Okay. And was it when you guys moved in there, was it a fixer-upper or was it a nice home?
We loved our home from the minute we saw it, but we did a lot of work to our home. Landscape and
Whole 9 yards?
whole 9 yards.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Was there something about that community that you guys liked? You and Rob?
I'd say it's the happiest place on the high desert. It was.
Well, what were some of the advantages to that home for you guys?
There were 2 lakes. Rob was a golfer. There was a golf course. There was a Olympic-sized swimming pool, a clubhouse, that sort of a thing. So it was. It's called Vacation Where You Live.
Okay. And over time, did your and Rob marriage change in some way?
It did.
And do you recall approximately when things began changing with your relationship?
I do.
And when was that?
Probably in about 2008.
Robbie would have been how old? About 5?
Yes,
So he was in kindergarten at that time.
kindergarten.
And Leanna, how old was she? About 2 then?
Yes.
And how did your relationship with Rob change?
We opened our marriage bed, and it changed the dynamics of our sacred bond.
Who was it that you initially became involved with in that sense?
At the time, just another couple, one other couple,
Who was that?
Dale and Nicole Smith.
How did this opening up your marriage and entering into an open marriage affect your relationship with Rob?
I don't even know how to explain it. I mean, it just, like I said, our sacred bond that we had was broken as soon as we made that choice together. And I don't even know how to explain it.
Did you, after you started into this type of relationship, you and Rob, with Dale Smith and his wife Nicole, during this time did you begin drinking more heavily?
Yes, that's when it started.
Were you and Rob partying a lot at that time?
We had just started to, I guess, our life. That's when things changed for us. We weren't like that before, and I stayed home with the kids, and we just lived quietly and together happily. And then once we opened that door, so much changed in our life.
At some point during the time after you opened up your relationship and began you and Rob and becoming involved with Dale Smith and his wife Nicole, did you and Dale become somewhat involved in an emotional relationship?
Yes, we did. They had problems prior to meeting Robert and I, so they already had a rocky relationship, and it just got worse for them, and I became who Dale found to confide in, depend on, that listened to him, and it was an emotional relationship. Yes.
Was it necessarily still a sexual relationship, or was it more of an emotional type
It was
of
an
thing?
emotional relationship.
And during the time that you and Dale were involved in this relationship, was Rob aware that you were basically involved in this relationship with Dale?
Yes, he was.
At some point, did Rob have you cut off the relationship with Dale?
Yes, he did.
Why did that occur?
Because Robert didn't want anybody else to know that we opened up our marriage with them.
Objection, hearsay, move to strike.
Did Robert and you agree that you weren't supposed to talk about opening up your marriage?
Yes.
Did, at some point, someone, or did Dale tell someone else about your relations with Dale and Nicole?
Objection, hearsay.
Did someone come to your home and talk about your relationship with Dale and Nicole?
Yes.
And who was that?
Her name was Corey.
Did she talk to you about it?
Yes. Yes.
And was Rob there when she was talking to the two of you?
No.
Was Corey part of this relationship that you had with Dale and Nicole?
No.
And was there kind of a unwritten rule that you weren't supposed to talk about opening up your marriage with anyone else between you and Rob?
Would say that again, please?
Sure. Was there some sort of unwritten rule, or was there an agreement between you and Rob not to ever discuss that you'd open up your marriage?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Kind of hesitated. Are you
Yeah,
unsure
okay.
what I'm referring to?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay. Did Rob ever get angry, or did you observe Rob get angry because Dale had spoken to someone else who wasn't involved in your relationship with Dale and Nicole, and talked to someone outside that relationship about what you guys have been doing?
Had I observed Robert getting angry
Yes.
at that? No, Robert didn't get angry with anybody. He just let me know that he was angry about that.
Objection,
And
hearsay, move to strike.
Restricted.
Did you, after whatever conversations between you and your husband, did you cut off the relationship with Dale?
yes,
Were you told to cut off the relationship with Dale?
yes,
Objection, hearsay, move to strike.
At some point, did you and Rob get involved with other people who were involved in the open marriages? And, I'll call it, for lack of anything else, swinging.
Objection, Vegas, to the term open.
Assistant.
Were there other couples that you and Rob became involved with sexually?
yes,
who were some of the other couples that you and Rob became involved with sexually? Well, let me ask you this. Was it only couples that was involved in this? Was there any single people involved with any sexual relationships outside the marriage between you and Rob?
No, not really.
Did you have a group of friends that you regularly partied with?
Yes.
Were these groups of friends that you went on adult-only vacations with?
Yes.
Were some of these people, were these people part of a group that you engaged in sexual encounters with outside of your marriage to Rob?
Yes.
Were Jason and Kelly Bernatine one of these couples?
Yes.
Now, during the course of the interviews that you conducted that were conducted by the police with you, you mentioned a number of times that Rob was on the computer a lot. You remember those times that you spoke about that?
Yes.
Rob kind of got hooked on watching porn on the computer.
Yes.
Did you feel like at that point in your marriage with Rob that he become kind of overly fixated with sex, in your opinion?
Yes.
Let me ask you this, were you?
Yes.
Do you recall how long it was or when it was that you cut off this emotional relationship that you had with Dale? Do you remember approximately when that occurred?
Bad with dates, Richard.
Okay. Well, let me put we know that based on the evidence that's presented here, you met Jonathan Bernatine sometime in the summer of 2012. Do you remember how, in proximity to that the summer of 2012, that it was that you and Dale stopped having any contact? Can't remember?
I don't remember.
Okay.
But
You have difficulty in remembering exact dates of things?
yes.
Okay. Now, we've already heard testimony from Jonathan and from your interviews with the police. You met him at Costco, is that right?
Yes.
Do you remember the first time that you met with him? What was he wearing?
He was wearing a fire department shirt.
And did you know other firefighters?
Yes.
Okay. Who were some of the other firefighters that you knew?
Jason knew Jonathan, as everyone knows, and Dale's also a fireman, so I'm familiar with.
There was a captain that Jonathan mentioned who he knew from San Bernardino County Fire Department. Did you know that individual also?
Yes.
And who was that captain? Do you remember his name?
Rowe.
Rowe?
Yes.
Was that someone that you knew?
Yes, I wasn't very close with him, but he was one of my good friends, ex-husbands.
Okay. Do you remember what you and he talked about that first time you met him?
I asked him if he knew Jason.
Yeah. Do you remember much else about the conversation, or
No, not really.
Okay. Did you give him your phone number that first time you met him?
No.
Okay. Do you remember how long it was after the first time you met him it was that you saw him the next time?
I don't remember the time, but it was, he had seen me a few other times in the store. I don't remember if it was like a week or a month, or I have no idea.
Did you eventually give him your phone number?
Yes, I did.
And why?
There was a Halloween party that we were going to, and I had mentioned it, that we were going to this party, asking him if he knew the couple that we were going to, this that was having the party. And it was casual. How he asked, well, can I get your number to, kind of in regards to this party kind of thing.
Did he begin calling you or call you any time in that time frame?
That same day, that same night.
Okay. And did you at some point tell him you were married?
Yes, I did.
Let me ask you this. When you were working at Costco, did you wear your wedding ring?
No, we weren't allowed to.
No jewelry?
No.
Okay. And when you first met him, did you know how old he was?
No.
Do you remember what he told you about himself?
What he told me about himself?
Did he tell you how long you've been a firefighter?
Yes, I would always ask, Jason, what's your best story? How was your, what was work? What's your best call, or whatever I would say in regards to work. So that's what I know it was in regards to, like, what's your best story kind of thing.
Did he tell you how long you've been a firefighter?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Not sure.
At some point, did you actually ask him how old he was?
Yes, he wouldn't tell me.
Did he tell you why he wouldn't tell you?
No, he just wouldn't answer my direct question, and it's when it would come to that.
Over in 2012 and into 2013, did you continue communicating with Jonathan Hearn?
Yes.
What did you and he do when you were talking? Or did you get together and meet with him on occasion during that time frame?
Yes.
And where did you meet?
We would meet at just certain places, like more private places, and get together and have coffee and talk.
And what did you talk about?
Gosh, in the beginning it was pretty simple life, and
Talk about the kids?
sure.
Well, you talk about your husband much.
Yes.
Did he talk about his life, his work?
Yes.
Did he talk about his family at all?
Yes.
How long after you and he first began talking was it that you actually became involved in a sexual relationship, if you can recall?
I can't remember exactly how long, maybe 4 months, 3 months. I don't remember exactly.
I ask, what did you see in him? What attracted Jonathan Hearn, you to Jonathan Hearn?
At first, there was nothing that attracted me to him, but over time, he was very smart. His words, the way that he spoke to me, he was like nobody I'd ever met before.
How so?
Just his whole approach to just how he spoke, his whole opinions and views, and just how he thought of life. It was very different than anybody I'd ever met before. He was very very intelligent. I felt like I was with the Human Dictionary.
Was he did he talk about his faith a lot to you during those time periods that you were talking to?
You know, not in the beginning, no.
Let me ask you this. Did you go to church on a regular basis?
Not at that time, no.
Did you have your own beliefs, faith?
Absolutely, I did.
And did you talk about, as your relationship with Jonathan progressed, did you talk more and more about religion and your faith?
As it progressed, yes. I remember a specific time. We were already emotionally attached, involved in a relationship at this point. And I remember bringing up, I did know that he was, he would have religious music playing on his phone and such. I remember that, and so I knew that about him. And I remember asking him about, we brought up our faith, and I remember being in tears, coming to tears, but this was well into our relationship already. And I didn't even realize it myself how, I guess, bad I felt about my priorities being off at that time in our life.
And that was yours and Rob's life?
Yes.
Once you and Jonathan began talking more and more about your faith and did he just, well, let me ask you this. At some point, did Jonathan indicate to you in some way that he knew you and Rob were involved in an open marriage?
Say that again. Did he
Sure.
know?
Did Jonathan indicate to you in any way that he was aware you and Rob were involved in an open marriage?
In the beginning, or I mean,
At,
over.
at some point in time, did he indicate to you he was aware of you and Rob being involved in an open marriage?
I remember the one time after that, being at Beef O'Brady's, and when he saw our group, he said, "You can tell from just you guys walking in, who you guys are, how you guys act, kind of thing." No. He never told me that. Besides that time, I can't remember. I don't know what you're.
Okay, that's fine. If you're not understanding me, just say you don't understand.
I don't understand. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I'll come back to this in a little bit, but why did you become involved with Jonathan? Initially, an emotional or extramarital affair. Why did you do that? Why did you become involved with him?
There's no right answer to say to that. I don't know. The attention that he pursued on me, the attention he showed me was very different than anything I'd ever, or that I guess I should say, what I was getting at that moment that time in my life. I don't know why I pursued a relationship with him.
Was there something about your relationship with Jonathan that you felt you needed?
Apparently there was, and at that time it became our sacred relationship, and I guess that's, now looking at it, what I was lacking in my life, in my marriage.
Well, let me ask you this. During the time that you were involved with Jonathan, did he make you feel like you were, it was dedicated solely to his interest in you?
Oh, absolutely he did.
And did that make you feel special to him?
Yes, I was very taken by his affection toward me.
Now, at some point, did you actually tell Jonathan that you and Rob were involved in an open relationship?
Over time, I didn't at first. He was pretty critical type of personality, black and white, totally. And I didn't feel comfortable at first telling him really my life at all.
But at some point, you did open up to him and tell him?
Yes.
During the time that you and Jonathan were involved in your extramarital affair with him, an actual sexual relationship, did he express guilt or some type of angst over the relationship that the two of you were in? Okay, I mean, I've understood angst. I'll back that up. Did Jonathan ever indicate to you, or during the course of your relationship, some feeling of guilt as a result of the relationship that the two of you were involved in?
Did he feel guilty? Or did he show guilt to me?
Yes.
Yes.
And how did that occur? In what form?
We would discuss it.
Well, we've seen some, heard some of the tapes, and text messages between you. Was there a situation where he was basically, you guys were having to pray to absolve yourself of your guilt?
over time, it became very, it turned into a spiritual, along with, it became very spiritually based. Everything was through prayer between him and I. He brought in wanting me to memorize scripture and Bible verses, just was very knowledgeable about the Bible, and that ended up becoming what played into it heavily.
You talked about the Beef O'Brady encounter. Had you told Jonathan you were going to be there that night?
Yes.
Were you actually surprised when he was there?
No.
At that point, had you and he already engaged in a sexual relationship by the time of the Beef O'Brady concert? Or
Yes.
okay.
And going back, I wasn't sure actually if he was going to be there or not, but I did. It was somebody that I worked with, and there were a lot of people going from work that I brought from home, my family, all my friends.
And your husband was with you?
Yes, Robert was there.
Now, was that before Robert found out that you were involved with in a relationship with Jonathan, Beef O'Brady, or was it
Yes,
after?
before.
Before. How long after you guys went to Beef O'Brady's and he met Jonathan there, was it that Rob found out that you and Jonathan were involved?
I don't remember.
Okay. Was it the same month, if you remember?
I don't remember.
Okay. At some point, did you and Rob talk about your involvement? And we're talking in 2013. Did Rob confront you about your involvement with Jonathan?
After he found out, he found my phone.
And what was on your phone that he observed?
Text messages and poetic text
Verses?
messages, poetic, yeah, that Jonathan had been writing me.
Okay. And did you and Robert discuss this and your involvement with him?
In that very moment or over time?
Well, let's start with what happened right after Rob found all this stuff from Jonathan on your phone.
He called him.
Were you present when Robert talked to Jonathan?
Yes, I was.
What did you hear Robert say?
Objection, hearsay.
Did you hear the conversation between Robert and Jonathan?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to stop there. Did Robert do this on the speakerphone, or was this Robert holding the phone up to his ear and talking to him?
Robert was holding the phone up to his ear.
And was Robert, based on what you observed of Robert's demeanor, was he angry?
He wasn't happy.
Did he do anything with your phone after he finished talking to Jonathan?
Yeah, he broke my phone.
After he had broken your phone, what happened next?
He went and bought me a new phone
That same day?
the next morning.
Did you guys do anything else besides him buying you a new phone?
We made up.
You guys argue about that?
Robert was upset, and he wanted to know who this guy was and what was so special about him. And I told him that Jonathan had dedicated a book to me and that I didn't know, and I was sorry.
Did Robert tell you never to see him again?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Did you continue to see Jonathan after Robert told you not to?
Yes.
Why?
I wish I knew why. I can't say why Jonathan came back into Costco, but it wasn't just his fault. I was, in a way, at that time, I guess, just addicted to his attention.
Well, we've heard you mention the fact that you were drinking. Do you think that you have an issue with some substance addiction type of thing, or addiction?
Absolutely, I do.
Was Jonathan kind of like an addiction for you? You needed to have that connection?
I didn't feel like that at the time, but I was in my addiction.
Despite Rob asking you or telling you not to see him again, you continued seeing them, is that right? And that's from 2013 on? Is that a yes?
Yes, there was moments of breaks, and I don't remember those dates or times or how long actually they lasted, but not that long.
Now we saw that one photograph with Jonathan holding up a letter with a look on his face, sad look on his face. Is that a picture he sent to you?
No, I'd never seen that picture before.
Did you actually receive that letter, if you recall?
I don't know what letter that was, so I'm not sure.
Shows you previously been marked as People's Exhibit 66. The photograph that's in the front of People's Exhibit 66, do you recognize that photograph at all?
No.
Turn the second page, and if you could review to yourself the letter that's attached to that photograph, and see if you remember receiving that at any time.
I don't remember. He'd written me lots of letters.
Does that one look familiar to you?
Probably.
Remember when that was sent to you?
No.
If it was. You know for certain you ever received this?
No.
After Rob found out, you and he made up. Did Rob ever ask you why you were seeing him? Or what the reason was for seeing him?
Yes.
And did you explain it to Rob why?
Yes.
Did Rob indicate to you that, you know, he realized that maybe you needed to make some changes in your lifestyle? The two of you?
That what? That
Sure. Did you indicate to Rob that there was something about Jonathan that it met your needs in some way?
yes.
Okay. What was it that you told Rob about Jonathan that you felt you needed to continue in the relationship with him with, or why you were involved in the relationship with him?
What did I tell? What did I tell Rob
Yes.
that I needed?
Did you explain to Rob what the reason for being involved with Jonathan was?
He wanted to know what was the deal with this guy, and I told him that he was very charming, and I told him about the things that why I was in a relationship with this guy, and at another point in time, I had told Robert that we needed to seek help, that I couldn't quite explain why I went outside of our life with him. But,
Did you and Robert, were you asking Robert to go see counseling, marital counseling?
Yes.
And did you do that?
No.
Did Rob have issues with being willing to seek help in that area?
Yes.
Was it something that he was against? Did Rob have a problem with counseling in general?
He didn't want to go to counseling.
During the relationship you were engaged in with Jonathan, did you and he discuss having a future together?
Yes.
What was the future that you and he talked about?
I definitely listened to his goals and dreams in life and fantasized with him a lot. But was also living a fantasy on the other end of the spectrum as well. I mean, with Robert.
On the one hand, you were living the fantasy of a perfect marriage with Robert, and then the fantasy of a future with Jonathan.
Yes, I guess so. I played into dreams and ideas and thoughts and life with this guy, but had a life of my own as well. So it was. It's hard to explain today, that's for sure.
In your mind, the best of both worlds?
Yes, I had the best of both worlds, but not really. At the time, it felt like I did, I guess. I don't know.
Did you discuss leaving Rob with Jonathan?
Yes, I guess I did, yes.
Was that part of the playing into the fantasies?
Yes.
Were you at any time seriously really considering leaving Rob?
No.
Why not?
I couldn't imagine my life without Rob.
Why?
Because I loved him.
Remember during the course of the interviews you said he was your best bud.
He was my best bud.
So your relationship with Rob, even though you were married and you were having your difficulties, he was still your best friend,
Absolutely, he was.
and he was your partner with your children.
Absolutely. He was a good dad. I never said he wasn't, ever.
Was he, although we all have our shortcomings, I know I do, was he a good man?
He was a great man.
Do you recall when you and Jonathan began communicating through Gmail accounts?
Yes, I remember, but I don't remember what the dates on that.
Were these accounts, your accounts that were read off, were those accounts that you actually set up?
No,
Who set up those accounts?
Jonathan did.
Did you and he communicate through Gmail to each other?
Yes.
Were you sending emails back and forth on the same account, or were you sending them from one account to the other?
You know what, Richard, he told me how to do it, what to do, and yeah, it was, I think, to, like, I guess to the same sender.
In other words, would he post an email, you go on it, read it, and respond to that email that was posted on the same account? Or write another email to yourself on that same account for him to read?
I can't remember how exactly it went, but something like that, yeah.
Okay. Why were you guys communicating via Gmail?
to not be, so you couldn't find out, so Robert wouldn't see my messages.
Were you trying to hide your relationship with Jonathan still, that you were still involved in, from Robert still?
Yes.
At some point, did Robert find the Gmail account?
Yes, I left my phone open, and he found it.
Was that sometime around March of 2014?
I don't remember when exactly it was.
Well, it was before Jonathan had brought over the burner phone to you. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
It's a good place to break, Connor. Thank you.
Take our lunch recess there. Remember not to form or express any opinion or discuss the case. See you all back at 1:30.